Welcome everyone. Quick introduction to myself. I'm Ben Cotton. I'm the open source community lead at Kusari. You can come see us. Our booth number is, I should know this, 1942. I've had to tell people that like 5 times today. But for the purposes of this talk, I am a maintainer of and current lead of the open source project security baseline special interest group in the OpenSSF. I always like to do some housekeeping before we get started. Just want to remind you of the usual disclaimers that this does not represent my employer, nor does it represent the OpenSSF because I am not an LF employee. If you have constructive feedback, there are some handles you can tag me in. I love the ego boost and the validation. If you have unconstructive feedback, you can send that to DevNull. I promise you that nobody can be more critical of me than I can. We will have time for questions at the end because I will probably talk way faster than I practiced, so we're good there. And just a reminder, there are no refunds on this talk. If you don't find this to be the easy way to secure your project, I'm sorry about your luck. So what are we going to talk about today? I'm going to talk about what is and is not the open source project security baseline, why it matters. We'll dig into some details about it. You may have heard about it. There have been a couple of talks and panel sessions already today, but maybe you want to learn a little more, see some screenshots of some YAML, things like that. And then we'll talk about how to apply it to your project and how you can participate in it. So, what is the baseline? Well, to start out, it's, I should make this a little bigger so I can actually see what my slides say. It is an OpenSSF incubating project. It's under the Orbit working group. Shout out to Eddie in the back. He is our working group lead. He is viciously shaking his head no at me, which means he really, really wants to be called out. It is an honest-to-goodness open source project led by community volunteers. Like I said, I'm not representing the LF because I don't work for them. I think most of the maintainers are working for somebody other than the Linux Foundation. But now, as of this morning, everyone who is not an LF member is a Golden Egg Award recipient. So if you want to earn the OpenSSF Golden Egg Award, apparently becoming a baseline maintainer is the path to do that. And we'll talk a little bit more about how it is a real honest-to-goodness project, open source project, towards the end. So I've said what it means already, but maybe you haven't been listening to me because I wouldn't either. So OSPS Baseline, some people call it OSPS, or however people pronounce things. The Open Source Project Security Baseline. It's a big mouthful, but it's a catalog of security controls. There are somewhere between 40 and 50 of them. We'll talk about that more in some detail here in a moment. And it's also a set of kind of guiding principles behind the baseline. Eddie, what did I say that the E meant? It doesn't mean Eddie. So I came up with this set of principles that spells out FRAM. And I thought like frame would be great. And every time I say that, Eddie offers me a different E, I think. Effective. Okay, sure. It should be effective. But water bottle. So the idea behind baseline is that it's for maintainers to secure their project. And if you've ever been a volunteer open source maintainer, you know there's a lot of stuff that's asked of you or demanded of you by very large companies with lots of money that they give none of to you. And we don't want to do that. We want it to be something meaningful, which is the M. I'm getting ahead of myself. So one of the ideas behind the baseline is that we only contain must things, not should. There are a lot of great projects out there that catalog a list of shoulds, and a lot of them are really great. But realistically, we can tell maintainers what they should do, and they're going to go do what they feel like. So we want to give them something that is meaningful, is realistic, that's something that we can ask a volunteer maintainer, hey, this makes sense for you to do. And it has to be actionable. So it has to be something that somebody who's not a security expert, which 99.9% of open source maintainers are not security experts. We want them to be able to read what that control says and go do something useful with it. So what isn't the baseline? Well, it isn't a lot of things, but specifically, it's not a score. You may have seen it presented as a score in certain places. It is not. The idea is that you conform to a level or you don't. It's not here to let's see if we can massage this a little bit. Like if we change this thing, we bump up our score a little bit. That kind of stuff's a lot of fun to do. I love trying to gamify and get more points on things, but it's not useful. It's not best practices badge or scorecard. These are both great OpenSSF projects. Best practices badge has a ton of great best practices. It's in the name. It gives you a badge. It's in the name. And a lot of those correspond to things in baseline, but it's sort of a superset. Scorecard's the same way. There's a lot of stuff that it measures. And scorecard, at least in the current implementation, really can only be automatically measured on GitHub. And there's a lot of open source projects on GitHub, and there are a lot that aren't. We try to make it more agnostic. So any open source project on any hosting platform should be able to use the baseline. So why does it matter? You ever heard this thing called a supply chain? It's kind of this neat idea I came up with. Like software supply chains have been in the news and in discussion just constantly, right? And it makes sense, right? You've got all these important either open source projects like the Linux kernel, the Firefox browser, or you have these big commercial applications. They're like 97% open source under the hood, right? And they're using these projects which are using other projects which are using other projects. And all it takes is one account compromise, and then you get one of the dozens of NPM compromises we've had over the last year. Or one social engineering attack, and you get the XZ backdoor. And then that cascades down. We really would like the computing we do to be secure. Both companies have a motivation, especially if they sell in Europe now, they have a very strong motivation, spelled CRA, to provide secure computing. But even just as a user, I want to know that when I log into my bank, the conversation is between me and my bank. And there's been a lot of talk in open source about, I am not a supplier. And I 100% agree with that. The supplier relationship is contractual, it's two-sided. But even if you're not a supplier, you're supplying things. So you'd better start believing in supply chains because you're in one, whether or not you want to be. If you are producing open source software that somebody else is using, you are now in a software supply chain. And supply chain security is a big deal, even if you're not a company. We want, I can use this term now, a rising tide lifts all boats, because TideLift got acquired, and so it doesn't exist anymore. So it's no longer seen as a promotion of them. But everybody uses computers, and we're all using other people's open source software, even if we're only using open source software ourselves. This laptop is a Mac. Work bought it for me. My personal computer runs Fedora Linux, all open source, but it's using a lot of other stuff, and one compromise there compromises me. And like I said before, maintainers aren't necessarily security experts, and they usually aren't, and we don't want to ask them to be. It would be ideal if everybody who ever used a computer knew all kinds of things about security and knew exactly what to do to keep themselves safe. But the world we live in is a world of people specializing in different things, and it's good that people specialize in things, because the stuff I know is not the stuff that other people know. It's why I don't grow all of the food that my family eats. We have some tomatoes and cucumbers that I grew, and that's nice. But we have farmers who take care of the rest. Specialization is important. And also, the baseline has these mappings to things that companies who use open source software care about, and can talk about why that matters, even if you don't care about companies. So our good friend Krobe here in the fourth row has done a lot of work to map different regulatory frameworks to the baseline controls. So you can say, if we're at baseline level 2, so that means these parts of the CRA or these parts of the best practices badge, NIST special publication 800-161, PCI DSS, if you take credit card information, all kinds of cool stuff like that. And so even if you don't care about that stuff, if you're, say, I need a better example, but if you're Daniel Stenberg and you're getting emails from people about the curl project, you can just tell people to go away unless they come back with a purchase order. Totally valid. Also, you could say, go away without a purchase order, but if you need some information, we meet this level of baseline, you can go look and see what requirements that meets for you. So it's a way of basically still telling someone to go away, but telling them to go away with information. And that makes everybody a little happier. Okay, so let's dig into it a little bit. We kind of understand what it is and what is not. So like, what's the shape of it? I've already mentioned levels a couple of times, and if you were in the panel session earlier, you heard me talk about this more, but I'm gonna assume you weren't or you were napping because it was right after lunch. So we set up three levels of baseline, not because 3 is like the perfect number, it's just a number that people like. It corresponds fairly well to the life cycle levels of used by OpenSSF and CNCF and other projects. And we understand that like security controls are not a one-size-fits-all thing. I wrote a little Python script that takes the list of people at my company, matches them up, and every 2 weeks I post that in Slack and say, here's our coffee matchups. We're a fully remote company. It's nice to be able to like have these informal conversations with each other, and like making it sort of randomized gets people to interact that might not otherwise. The script is not important. It is written in Python because I like to practice sometimes to make sure I still know how to type like things on the keyboard that aren't slides and emails. It doesn't need to meet the strictest security controls. It's on GitHub in case somebody else wants it, but like it doesn't matter, it's not important. So it meets baseline level 1 probably. I should actually verify that at some point. It could meet baseline level 1. And that's for any code or non-code project with any number of maintainers or users. Basically, if you could put it on GitHub or GitLab or whatever, it's reasonable to think you should be able to meet baseline level 1. If you can't, that's a problem with baseline. And so this applies to things like documentation projects or graphic design projects. You're uploading your SVG files from Inkscape into Git. Did you know you could do that? It's really cool. And you move up to level 2. Now we're kind of figuring, okay, you're probably a code project. You probably have at least 2 maintainers and some number of consistent users. You're more than just, a Hacker News comment at this point. You're like actually doing stuff. It's like the Guac project, the Graph for Understanding Artifact Composition. That's an OpenSSF incubating project that several of us here in the room contribute to. It I still need to fill out the last couple boxes, but basically meets level 2. It kind of fits that mold. And then level 3, we say, okay, anything that has a large number of consistent users, hopefully it has a large maintainer base, hopefully it's well-resourced, it's owned by, or sponsored by companies, a foundation, lots of individual donors, like there's some economic incentive to be able to do some of this stuff at this point. And the strictest stuff falls in level 3. And there are categories as well. The categories don't really mean anything, except that humans like to put things in buckets, so we put some things in buckets. It just kind of helps you conceptually understand what the different controls apply to. And sometimes they don't neatly fit into a bucket, and we've had discussions like, is this quality, or is this build and release? And eventually like, you know what, it's just gotta end up somewhere. But the idea is just for you to kind of understand what in general it's talking about and keep things that are somewhat related groups together. I probably won't have time to go into it today. The legal category is up for debate. So far, I have not convinced people, but all of you in the room can back me up, and then we'll barnstorm. So this is what it looks like. This is a screenshot off the website. So it has an identifier, looks very fancy, tells you about it. gives a little more description, and then gives specific requirements and recommendations. So this one, AC01.01, there could be a .02, 03, 04, etc. You scroll down a little bit, you see what levels it applies to, and then you see the framework mappings, so you can kind of just get a sense of what it all does. It's very straightforward. If you don't like websites, that's cool. You can look at the YAML. That's where we keep it in GitHub. It uses the Jamara specification and library to define and produce it. Really neat. Everyone loves YAML. This is KubeCon, so we're, I know my audience. It's cool. All right, so you probably came here today not to hear me ramble about some theoretical stuff, but you want to know how to apply to the baseline to your specific project. You're like, Ben, I'm so excited. I want to make my project more secure. I'm going to hit at least level 2, maybe level 3 if I've had enough coffee. We're good to go. So how do you do that? Well, one useful thing, I wrote this for myself in the spirit of scratching your own itch. We produce a checklist. It's on the website. It's markdown formatted. You just drop it into the issue, and that just gives you a checklist to run down for each level. All right, that's kind of helpful, right? But it's not super helpful. It's a start. So there's an easy automation option. LFX Insights from the Linux Foundation. You may have heard of those people. It uses a tool to do a lot of automated analysis. You can see that it presents like percentages. Again, we know, we've had conversations, we'll continue to have conversations. But the cool thing is you can open up all of those and expand them, and you can see, all right, these are done. So you just go back to your markdown checklist, boom, 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 boom. It's really great. And so even if you're not a Linux Foundation project, you can now add yourself to Insights. And the cool thing about Insights is it gives a lot of other sort of community health stats that I find valuable as a maintainer. How quickly are we opening issues? Are we closing issues? Are we opening them faster than we're closing them? How many people have contributed? What companies are they from? What's our contributor diversity? So shout out to the Linux Foundation for that. There is other tooling in the works. Some is further along than others. I would love to say that there is a tool that will just do everything and then immediately fix it. That does not exist yet. But in the Orbit working group, we do have a tooling SIG that would love to have you show up and help. Like I said, there's an open source project that powers the Linux Foundation. I'm going to point at Eddie again, and he's going to be like, no, don't talk about that. But that is a good place to start. There are other tools. Mike has put together a prototype of one. Puerco has put together a prototype of one. You can write your own, we don't care. Just the more automated tooling is, the better it is for everyone. And then you might say, well, how do I express it? The current way to do it is just to say that you meet it, right? Ben's cool project meets level 2 of the baseline of a specific version as of this date. Evan is working on an in toto format attestation, so you can kind of more human or machine readably express that. And you can definitely share your evidence if you want, but we do not, as part of the baseline, explicitly require anyone to share it. And again, you can say, yeah, I'll be happy to share the evidence of all this stuff if you send me a purchase order. We'd love to take your paid support money. Again, so this is a tool for maintainers to get their project security hygiene into a good state. So how do you participate in the baseline project? You can file an issue on GitHub. Like I said, we're an open source project. There is a channel on the OpenSSF Slack, SIG Security Baseline. We're happy to have conversations in there. It is open 24/7, unless Slack goes down or US East 1 has another outage. And we have monthly meetings. They used to be bi-weekly, and we decided things are stable enough that monthly seems good. And that's where, if you like to come argue about the definition of words and nuances of phrasing, that's a great place to participate in that. But otherwise, you can see it all at baseline.openssf.org. And that is the last of my slides, and it is 20 minutes and 16 seconds into the presentation, apparently. She just held up the 5-minute sign. I nailed it, y'all. Nailed it. So I'd be happy to take your questions. Except for Eddie Knight.
Have you seen any governments or foundations adopting the baseline?
Well, Eddie, it's great that you asked if I had seen any governments or foundations adopting the baseline. I actually haven't read that link you shared yet, but there was apparently was it the German government? BSI makes heavy reference to baseline and in some of its recent guidance. There have been conversations with the Linux Foundation and its sub-foundations, obviously. We're not like far along in that, but I don't think I'm speaking out of turn when I say that eventually the Linux Foundation would like to see all of its projects meet an appropriate baseline level. That will take time, but it is in the works.
Just to bolster, because I don't know if you knew about this when you were making your slides, but Finos, the financial services vertical, did elect to have their maturity and promotion include baseline requirements. So
thanks, Eddie. I'm sure I can give you credit for that. Yep. Yes, Professor.
I just had you made kind of a number of comments to make sure you were kind of saying that you only provide kind of must requirements. Do you have shoulds, like, is in the sense of, like, if you kind of want to go a little bit further, is that kind of on the roadmap in that you'll get to it when you've finished the musts? Or because I feel like I would like to know some other options as well, like, or other things I should be thinking about.
Yeah, so philosophically, I would like to keep baseline strictly to must. I think best practices badge offers a great collection that is a combination of must and should. And so, if you've met all the baseline controls that are reasonable for the size and scope and meaningfulness of your project, then I would say, look at the best practices badge as sort of the next step.
Plus baseline makes sense for must, right?
Yeah.
Okay. No, I was curious. You mentioned about how baseline and various levels now are being picked up, or it sounds like you had done some work to crosswalk between some of the regulatory bodies and some of that documentation. Is that publicly available yet? Or okay.
Yes.
It's in the YAML file. It's on the website. And it's also in an amazing Google sheet.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful.
So for the recording, Krob answered, it is in the YAML file I showed and rendered on the website. And there is a spreadsheet. There's a version of which is checked into the repo. So just kind of for posterity and easy discoverability. One of the things I would like to do is modify our tooling a little bit so that right now you can go to a baseline control and look at the control catalogs and see. I'd like to be able to make that on the website the other way. So you're like, I'm interested in the CRA, and then the tooling is written in Go. It's definitely doable. Like, the data is there. You just got to flip around how you look at it. So if somebody's super interested in that and wants to get to it before one of the regular contributors do, we would happily accept that pull request.
Right. I think it would endorse, regulator adoption rather than technical expert adoption.
Right. We have 49 seconds left if there are any other questions. Krob, you have a question. Please step up to the microphone.
Eating my 49 cents.
Oh, yeah. You think I didn't do that on purpose?
So the baseline has just under 50 controls. What if I had an amazing idea that I saw that you were missing something? Do I have the ability to suggest additional changes or additional ideas to the baseline?
Yes, we would love that. We actually have a collection of open issues of things that we thought maybe this is worth at least discussing, and somebody can submit. We do want to keep it kind of minimal, but like, there are things we had a release in February and a release in October. We have added things because we're like, oh, that was missing. We should add that. Conversely, we're also open to people saying, this is completely impossible or unreasonable. Can you change it from a level 2 to a level 3 or get rid of it entirely? Like I said, I have made a proposal that maybe the legal requirements don't actually belong in the open source project security baseline, and they belong in some other thing that would be complementary, but we'll see. And I'm being told that I'm at time, so thank you everyone for your attention, and I appreciate it.